Just a fantastic title card again for this week. Thanks to Brett for doing these. This is part 2 of our entire society is one big satanic ritual. And folks, the response from last week's show has been overwhelming. Overwhelmingly positive. People want to hear about this aspect of this information, I can tell. They are hungry and ready to hear the occult dynamic that is at work in our lives. They know that this is going on. They know it under the surface, even at a subconscious level. And even many new listeners to the show, started listening here, which I don't think is the right way to go about it. I really recommend going back to number 1 and working your way forward in order. I can't say that enough. But even the new listeners were blown away and had a lot of very positive comments to make. I've heard a lot of positive feedback on last week's show, and we're going to continue this topic for this week. So I do want to reiterate this quote and again dedicate this presentation along with last week's to the memory of Thomas Jefferson, who said, "He who knows nothing is closer to the truth than he whose mind is filled with falsehoods and errors." And I can't agree more strongly. This is what I have called in my work negative knowledge. And we have far too much of it in human society. We have a society in the human sphere whereby people not only don't know the truth about any given dynamic that is very important to know about what's taking place in our world and in human psychology and in the human, psychological realm, okay? But they believe things that have been told to them and repeated to them endlessly that quite frankly and simply aren't true. So in order to get back to a place where they don't know anything accurate about a given topic, they have to dig their way out of that hole of negative knowledge, of reinforced beliefs that are not correct. And that's where we're at in our world. That's why the world is so enslaved. We have a society that not only doesn't know anything about how things are really run or how they're really taking place in the human psyche or in the world of actual nature, but they believe all these inaccuracies and inconsistencies about what they think is going on. That quite frankly is not true. And this is the hole that people have to dig themselves out of. And I'm telling you, most of them have such a huge ego, a crystallized ego, that is just built up from the minute they've been put out of the womb into this world and the social engineering that comprises it. That ego has just crystallized into just a hardened diamond and cannot be broken down. And these people just believe they're right and that they're the ones who understand what's going on, and any contradictory information not only needs to be thrown out and dismissed, but it should be silenced. I mean, could you imagine being in that place of ego? But this is where the majority of our world is at, folks. So we have to be willing to hear things that make us uncomfortable. As I've said before, if you get offended by what I say here, get as offended as you like, because I'm speaking an accurate dynamic of what is in the world from a first-hand perspective account. I've been involved with dark occultism and Satanism directly in my life. This is what I have to almost chuckle and laugh at. It makes me angry, but I have to try to take the approach that I just have to look at people like a naive child that's an absolute fool who tries to say they know more about Satanism than I do when I was a priest in this religion. Or they dismiss it and say it doesn't matter. It's meaningless. I don't believe that shit, so why should I worry about it? Because the rulers of the world believe it, they're acting upon it, and their power in the world affects your life whether you want it to or not. That's the reality of the situation. That's how it works. It doesn't work by this new age nonsense, this new age bullshit that if you don't pay attention to something, you don't give power to it. Sorry, folks. That's called being ignorant of something, and ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is death. Okay? Ignorance is slavery and death. So we have to become knowledgeable about how the psychopaths who are running this world, about how their religious belief system works because they believe in it and they are acting upon it. And when somebody believes in something fervently with a cult-like religious fervor, and then they propagate that to their followers, and their followers also believe in that, whether that dynamic is complete nonsense and wrong, it does not matter, because they are acting upon it in the world on a unified front, which is what I explained last week, that the political systems are just the two sects of the cult. We have to stop looking at them as religion, as political parties, and start looking at them as sects of the one undivided religious cult, that they are just masks that are presented to us in the political domain, so that we ourselves believe in a lesser down, watered down version of their occult religious ideology. And then in playing into that game, we are instituting our own slavery, because that is their long-term unified goal for the world, for the people of this world. So let's jump into the section of this presentation. I'm going to just jump ahead in the slides. I will post all of the slides for both parts of this two-part presentation with the podcast. But I'm going to jump to the section that really begins talking about how the society is satanically structured as a huge ritual, a huge non-stop, never-ending satanic ritual that goes on every single moment of every single day in our world. And as I'm going to talk about in this section, which is titled The Death Cult Society, because that's what the cult of the Black Sun is. That's what the Order of Death is. That's what the cult without a name, which people very wrongly refer to as the Illuminati, which is a term I personally hate, applied to this worldwide satanic cult that are really the de facto masters of our world, unfortunately. Okay? I don't like calling them the Illuminati. The people who are truly illuminated spiritually and who truly understand what's going on in our world and are aligning their behaviors with natural law and are doing the right things in our world, not acting in concert with these psychopathic ruling clowns. They're not the Illuminati. The people who know the truth about what's going on and act rightly to make the world better are the Illuminati. That's what we have to understand. We need to take that term back. We need to take it back. I'm one of the Illuminati. Okay? I'll say it openly and honestly right to people. That doesn't mean I belong to their big satanic club, because I do not. But they are not the illuminated ones. We have to stop allowing them to use that term and get away with it, because they're nothing of the kind. You have to understand what the term really means in Latin, and understand that they do not represent that term. The truly enlightened beings of the world who are trying to change the world for the positive toward truth, love, and freedom are the illuminated ones. Okay? It's a misnomer that has been too long used for these psychopathic rulers. So they don't really have a true name, as I said last week. They don't really refer to themselves. They talk about themselves as the old religion, the ancient religion. That's all. That's what they refer to their sick satanic belief system and ideology as, the old religion. That's the only thing I've really ever heard them refer to themselves as. People have called them the Order of Death, which is very accurate, because they are a death cult worshiping society, a death worshiping society. Okay, a death worship cult. People have referred to them as the Order of the Black Sun, which is very accurate, because they are using light or knowledge against people. They have knowledge which others don't. They wield that knowledge in a dark capacity to mind control, mentally and spiritually enslave people, and eventually physically enslave them. So that is not the cult of the true positive sun, of true light and knowledge, but that's the cult of the Black Sun, the dark sun. That's an accurate name to apply to them. Okay? I have simply referred to them as the dark occult, which I think is probably the most accurate name that can be given to them. The dark occult mind controllers of our world. That is the most accurate way that I can personally describe them. Although most people don't usually use that terminology, I'm the one who really has popularized that term. So that's what I see them as, the dark occult mind controllers of our world. But we can look at them most certainly as a death worship society, or what I call them as a death cult. And they have structured our society around their death cult. And what the death cult wants to do is it's a several point agenda. They want to poison everything that human beings have to take in as forms of energy. So what's the first thing you can't live without? You can live without this the shortest amount of time, and that's breathable air, ladies and gentlemen. You know, then you go to food, and you could live without that a little longer. They're trying to poison that too. Then you go to water. You could live without that, you know, water would be second. I'm sorry. Air, then water. You could live without that a little less. Then food, you could live without that for a longer period of time. They're poisoning that, you know. And then they want to poison the energetic system. They want to poison the soil that our food grows in. You know, they want to put poison into us through alleged medication, which is actually poison. Okay, they want to put all kinds of death into our society by the continued murder and rape of the animal kingdom, the continued murder and rape of small children. Okay, this death cult works through many different aspects of a unified agenda to endlessly create more death in our society. And before we go back to the progression of slides, I want to just reiterate that what inspired this presentation, particularly how our entire society is a death cult, is I was just walking down in my streets, in my vicinity, in my neighborhood here in South Philadelphia, around the 4th of July, not right on that date, but like right around it. And just taking in how many people had been doing cookouts on that previous weekend, and just the amount of animal death and the amount of just cooking of animal carcasses that were being done in this small neighborhood alone. And I'm just imagining how much that's going on every single day, not just citywide, not just statewide, not just nationwide, not just countrywide, you know, not just continent-wide, but all throughout the entire planet. You know, how many animals are just murdered continuously? And it's a death ritual. This is a satanic bloodletting death ritual, which I'm going to talk about in a later slide. And that's what inspired this whole presentation. So let's start to look at some of the ways that this death cult operates. The first is they poison our air that we breathe. First of all, it's poisoned with industrial pollutants, chemical waste products, all kinds of airborne pollutants, mostly through carbon exhaust that comes from our forms of energy that we use in vehicles that we drive. So this is hydrocarbon burn fuel that is from the type of gasoline-powered hydrocarbon vehicles that we employ. And this is being pumped into our air that we breathe. I mean, you go to a very rural area, dust doesn't accumulate to the levels that it does in a major city. You have to dust from the fallout from the air at a much lower rate, at a much less frequent rate in a highly rural environment where you don't have cars with their, you know, combustion engine fuel being burnt everywhere than you do in a major populated region. I mean, I can just see it in the difference between my mother's home at the Jersey Shore when I go there to visit her, and the amount of dust that ever accumulates in that place compared to something like even a small street that I live on in South Philadelphia, where cars are just blowing exhaust down the street all day long. The environment is just way more polluted, and you have to keep up with dust way more. And we're breathing that into our lungs every single day. Then on top of that, they're spraying whatever the chemicals are in the chemtrails. And this is a aerosol project that planes deliberately spray from aerosol nozzles equipped to the jets and tankers that they're spraying it from. And this is declassified. This has been declassified for a number of years, that it's called stratospheric aerosol injection. SAG is one of the terms that is used, which is gas spelled backwards. Okay? And, this is something that is going on continually. No, it doesn't matter who's president. They're not doing anything about this because this is a joint military project. It's a joint military black ops covert intelligence project. Some people have referred to it as Operation Cloverleaf. But they used to call it stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. Stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, which also has the acronym of SAG, S-A-G, which is gas spelled backwards. They don't do that for any, frivolous reason. They're gassing the population. That's what this is doing. I explained last week. Let me explain a couple of things about this. First of all, you want to just type that in, chemtrails, you're going to get conspiracy theory related pages that are trying to debunk it because all the major search engines are trying to toe the rulers' line about what this is. They're trying to toe their worldview and, their whole agenda and their whole narrative about it. You have to do deep research about this. Let me tell you a couple of the people who I respected in the research about this. Okay, first of all, you have to look into Clifford Carnicom's work. Okay, absolutely essential. All right, you want to look into, I'm trying to think of his name. I think his last name is Henry. I can't quite remember his first name. But he was brought on to Coast AM years ago. I should have it in my notes, but I neglected to put it in there. If maybe someone can just look it up. But his last name is Henry, and he did a lot of work on what chemtrails and geoengineering was about. And I highly recommend his work on it. Jeff Rentz has covered this since he's basically had his website up. Folks, I knew about chemtrails since 1996 when I really just started peeking my eyes open a little bit from under the covers, okay? And that's a long time. That's over, we're going on over 20 years about this, that I've known about this. Yeah, 23 years I've really known about chemtrails. It's amazing when you think about it. I was out there with a big VHS camcorder outside my home in South Philly. Those kinds, like you put the whole VHS tape in the door on the side and it was like this freaking big, the whole camcorder was like this big, and the door was as big as a VHS cassette. I had one of those things back then. Okay. I was a techie back then and that was like state of the art, I'm out there recording these pilots spraying this shit in our atmosphere at a very low altitude. My family members are like, what are you doing? I'm like, they're spraying us. Can't you see it? That's not a contrail. The chemtrail jet would fly by at like 9,000, 10,000 feet altitude, at which contrails do not form ice crystals, especially any kind of what they say are lingering or persistent contrails. Does not happen. The atmospheric conditions do not make that possible at 8 to 10,000 feet. You need to hit the minimum floor of about 22, 23. I'm going to give you 22, 23,000 feet. But generally, it's accepted in meteorological science that a contrail does not form ice crystals, does not form condensed ice crystals at any less than 25,000 feet. That's the floor of where contrails form. And visually, you can determine, with just a little bit of knowledge about how altitudes work, you could determine that these planes that are spraying these endless lingering trails in huge grid patterns, first of all, are not commercial airline patterns. Secondly, are often flying 2x2, 3x3, which no commercial pilots are even allowed to do. They have to stay in very restricted airspace lanes. I know a little bit about that as well because I have close personal friends who work at airports and, speak with the air traffic controllers and understand how that works. And, these are not commercial airlines, number one. Number two, they are often DC-10 tanker jets, which are military aircraft, unmarked as well when people look at them through high definition binoculars or through cameras with very advanced optical zooms. their markings have been stripped away, which is proof that they're part of covert ops. And they are spraying it off in low altitudes, which condensation trails do not form at. These are particulate trails. And again, you're going to have people that are going to spit out and toe the line of government-funded nonsense and insist they know the science better, when they've taken no material science classes, they've taken no thermodynamics classes, they've taken no classes on physics of gases at all, okay? And they don't understand how this level of meteorological science works, and they just want to say, because I don't believe that our government would be spraying us with unknown metals from the alkaline earth metal family of the periodic table, that can't be happening, because I don't want to believe that they're doing that without the public's consent. And that's called being a naive child and saying that your view of reality will be determined by your belief system about what you are comfortable considering, versus looking at it from a true scientific methodological perspective of making accurate observations based on real data sets. Because you don't have those tools in hand. You don't have the true scientific methodology in hand. You reason from emotions instead of through true observation and true understanding of laws of nature. You don't have the trivium in hand and the scientific methodology in hand. That's the problem. And people want to believe that they somehow have true scientific measuring methodologies in hand when they do not. That's called negative knowledge. I'm going to start with a wrong belief. Not only not look at what's true, not only not look at the right way to come to the accurate understanding of what's true through real science, but I'm going to believe what I want based on completely inaccurate observations and measuring methods. And then call that somehow science or truth. When people who think like that have their head up their ass. And they're in a place of negative knowledge, and they're much farther away from the truth than people who go, I don't know how that works. I know nothing about it. Those people are much closer to the truth than an egg-headed jackass who says, I want to look at it this way from this worldview perspective, and because I don't want to believe my government's spraying fucking poison on me, that I'll believe that it is this way. There's nothing scientific about you, jackass. You don't know the meaning of the word science. Okay? Straight to your face, I'll tell you. So first of all, start understanding a little bit about meteorological science. Start understanding a little bit about fluid mechanics. Okay? You don't know anything about it? Admit you don't know anything about it. There's college level, university level courses. You could take them right on iTunes U. Go on iTunes, go to iTunes U. You could take courses in all of this for free. High level university courses. You don't want to trust that? Start really combining that level with other eclectic knowledge from authors, writers, declassified projects, declassified white papers on these topics. There's an endless amount of research you could do about it. Get the ARC drive for number one. There's plenty on there about it. And there's enough to send you into hundreds of thousands of hours, let alone literally probably hundreds of years worth of research that you'll never be able to exhaust. And yet there are people who just say, no, you're off about this. You don't know. It's the science is in on it. You know, I gave the puking doll from Team America, last week. I got to put him in an isolated presentation so I could just bring him up at any time. No, you don't know there's science about this. Wikipedia told me that, and Snopes told me these are just persistent contrails. Yeah, persistent contrails. Right. At 8 to 10,000 feet, where contrails don't even form. You're talking about something that's an impossibility of even forming at that altitude. And yet, it's going to linger up there for hours and spread out into a haze. Yeah. Smacked ass science is what that's called. Smacked ass pseudoscience of people who never broke open a fluid mechanics textbook in their lives. Okay? Know absolutely nothing about the laws of thermodynamics. Zero. And yet want to say they know how it fucking works. So folks, the real reason they're doing this, there's many reasons, okay? And a lot of researchers have speculated, and some are more accurate than others over the real reasons for this part of the death cult, this spraying. One is, first of all, it adds more pollutants to the atmosphere we breathe every damn day. And it's already sickly polluted enough to give a lot of people lung cancer in our society through all these artificial hydrocarbons and artificial heavy metals that shouldn't be in our air that we breathe. People go, oh, these are natural elements. Yeah, well, you know what? I know boron's a natural element. That doesn't mean you should be breathing it in a vaporous form in the concentrations that it's sprayed in the air. Or aluminum. So what if they're on the periodic table of elements? That doesn't mean you should. So is plutonium. Doesn't mean you should be eating bowls of it. Okay? Just because something natural doesn't necessarily mean it should be taken into the human body in certain concentrations and forms. So one, they're directly polluting the air. Two, they're polluting the soil that we depend upon for nutrient-dense foods that nourish our body and all of our trillions of cells. And what that does is it alkalizes the soil that we're growing food in on all of the farms that we grow food upon. Food cannot be grown properly in alkaline soil. If the soil is on the alkaline pH, just look up a little bit. You don't have to be have the totality of the knowledge of science to understand these basic generalities and principles that are true generally about human farming, about farming practices, not human farming of human beings. That's social engineering. About the farming of actual, plant-based foods that we plant in the ground in soil that should be highly nutrient dense and should be acidic. For high nutrient density food to grow in farming soil, it not only has to be tilled and rotated, but it has to have an acidic pH. The pH has to be toward the acidity on the acid pH scale, on the acid to base pH scale. That means it has to be in the 6 region, probably around 6.8. Soil has to be around 6.8 acidity, I think I'm approximately correct, somewhere around there. And what the spraying of these soft metals, these alkaline earth metals, is doing when it comes down to the ground and goes into the soil, it is sending the pH upward toward the alkaline scale. Usually it takes it to at least around a 7.2, sometimes up as high as a 7.4 pH. What that does is that prevents the plants from properly taking nutrients up through the root system in the quantities that they need to be pulled up through it and into the plant material that we then take in through fruits and vegetables. So therefore, it's forcing the soil to grow a less nutrient-dense food source. And that's contributing to disease, obesity, general lack of well-being, lack of mental energy, lack of physical energy, etc. And they know this. They know how this science works. And if you ask me, that's the real underlying agenda. It's part of poisoning the food supply and making it less dense and bringing soft metals into it. It also acts as a plasmification of the atmosphere because they are trying to put certain signals and piggyback signals into the atmosphere when they make it particulate plasma. Our atmosphere is not what it used to be. You could hearken back to the They Live film by John Carpenter, where the scientist who had discovered the signal of the alien beings is trying to alert people about it. And one of the things that he says is they are turning our atmosphere into their atmosphere. And this is something that is absolutely being done. They are plasmifying the atmosphere for their purposes. And that is to put out different mind warping, mind controlling signals into the atmosphere. Two, that they can control what happens to mind states, our general worldview and moods, and they can control DNA. they can actually have an effect upon genetic structures at a distance through the plasmification and combining that with putting certain high frequency signals output into the environment. If you want to research more about this, I highly recommend the work of Dr. Nick Begich. He's done tremendous work on action at a distance mind control. And I really recommend his work on the topic, among many others. You could look at Thomas Vallone's work on it as well. So, I'm sorry, not Thomas Vallone, Thomas Bearden. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. I meant Thomas Bearden's work on that, on action at a distance weaponry and scalar interferometry. And this could, this type of plasmification of the atmosphere through this type of particulate spraying, especially in the stratosphere, can really amplify these types of scalar waves and signals. And again, it's a science most people know zero about. Nothing. Never heard of it. Never looked into it a moment in their lives. Don't know what sources to go to look into it. And will generally just form a totally uneducated opinion on it. And then say that they know something. When once again they know not only nothing, they know less than nothing. Because they latch on to erroneous and fallacious belief systems about it. They're totally ensconced in moral, in logical fallacies. So they have a totally fallacious belief system regarding it. And that puts them into the place that I call negative knowledge. So, you know, I don't think it wasn't William Henry, but it was, you know, something like that, Henry, who has a great site on it. If my producer could look it up, he could just tell me. I don't really care if your voice comes over the air. And Clifford Carnicom, okay, look up the work of Dr. Nick Begich, Dr. Tom Bearden, and there are rabbit holes you can go down for years to study these forms of covert science. These are occulted sciences that they don't want people to know about. So that being said, let's move on to the next part of the death cult, because we got a lot of these to go through. Again, the next step is poison the water supply. Everyone needs water. Everyone needs to drink water. Everyone basically cleans their home and food with water. Everyone showers with water. Okay? So, if you can poison the pool, you poison all of the beings in the pool. If you poison the whole ocean, you poison all the life in the ocean. Water has to go in every person's body because it is an essential part of life, and without it, you die. Plain and simple. So that's why they are putting, again, a waste product in the water. You have the name? Dane Whittington. Oh, Dane Whittington is another guy. My producer told me that. That's not who I was referring to. His last name is definitely Henry. But Wigington, just phenomenal work at geoengineeringwatch.org, I believe is his site. I'm telling you, you know, Dane Wigington has done absolutely incredible work on geoengineering, and people should absolutely check out his website. He's a fantastic speaker as well. Okay, so there's just a few resources on that topic alone, which you could literally spend, I'm telling you, from now till the rest of your life researching. And yet people will still insist it's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't actually exist. When there's so many declassified government white papers and international white papers on this whole stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, SAG, that that you could just look that up and really go off on an entire study of that. Similarly, you can go off on a study of fluoride, the fluoridation of our drinking water, and look at how this is a total agenda. Go ahead. No, that's okay. Well, I'll put it in the notes when I find it. But anyway, this is a slide from The Truth About Cancer. I ended the show on this last week, but I'll read it again. Before fluoride was added to the water supply, it was marketed as rat poison. That's right. Stannous fluoride and sodium fluoride are rat poison ingredients. Okay? No amount of them should be no amount of that type of poison should be taken into the human physiology. It's poison at the lowest possible levels, let alone at the amount of parts per million that they're putting it into our drinking water claiming that it's good for our teeth and gums, when in fact it will cause dental fluorosis, it will cause bone weakening, it will cause all kinds of harmful health effects as opposed to health benefits. This is the toxin mass medicated to the majority of the United States population with no verifiable benefits and without our consent. And I will add, with no ability to control the dosage that is administered of this poisonous toxin, because no one monitors how much drinking water anybody is drinking. We're encouraged to drink 6 to 8 glasses of drinking water a day, and most people will do that through the tap water instead of through purified water like reverse osmosis purified and or distilled water. Distilled water is the best water to drink. This is another big nonsense crock of shit mind control op that is put out there by people who want to say drinking distilled water will leach chemicals from your body. I mean, I need my vomit puppet, I just need him now for that distilled water will leach chemicals from the body. Because, I mean, the people who parrot this shit, they're just dumb people. They have not looked into the mechanics of water and why it is necessary for the body, which is one of the biggest studies to do if you're going to understand how a human being works. If you haven't made a study of water and understand that you need the most purified, you need the purest form of water. And then if it's structured, it's even better. If it's molecularly structured, then you're really making progress. But if by default, you need pure H2O, and that's distilled water, distillated water, okay? I don't care how it's distilled. It could be solar distilled. It could be, distilled through heat, a simple chemical process of distillation through heat, okay? Distilled water is the best water to drink. Okay, and really to do anything with, because it's purified. Now, you purify water enough through nature, you get something very close to distilled, it running over rocks, down streams, etc. Nature has its purification methods. Okay, that's why we have rock filtration methods that are built like rock and sand filtration methods that are built like nature builds its filtration methodologies. Okay? So, filtering water is great. Most filters don't get it down to a distilled level. Reverse osmosis pushes it through a microscopic membrane, and it will filter it down probably as close as you're going to get it to distilled without actually distilling it, which is what I use. I use reverse osmosis right in my kitchen. I have a reverse osmosis system connected to the water that comes in at my sink, and it goes into through a RO filter membrane and then into a collection tank, and then I have a separate very similar to this a faucet that you see here that is set up at my sink, and I highly recommend everyone to do that. And there's no excuse why everyone should not have that. If I asked even my listening audience how many people have a reverse osmosis filtration system set up at their sink where they pull any of their drinking water and or water that they cook with and or wash their fruits and vegetables with, and I guarantee you it will be less than 1% of even my listening audience, and that is a horrifying statistic. Because if you are using tap water for any of that, you're getting all of this horrible toxin in the form of fluoride, sodium fluoride, and other fluoride derivatives like hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a cocktail of different types of fluoride and chemical toxins that no one should be putting into their body. Hydrofluorosilicic acid. Look that one up as well, okay? It's a nerve toxin. That's what this is. That's why people don't have the ability to concentrate, okay? That's why they can't think clearly. They're drinking this shit water, okay? They're drinking poisonous water. And then people will say this isn't such a big deal. Oh, well, go gulp down a whole glass of, just take the rat poison right out of the rat poison container that says number 1 ingredient, sodium fluoride or stannous fluoride. Take the rat poison ingredient, stir those crystals up real well, baby. Put them in a nice glass of drinking water and gulp the fucking thing down all day long. Go right ahead. That's what you deserve. You don't want to look into this and you want to just say, this is a conspiracy theory. Go ahead, jackass. Put your poison in your water in a higher concentration and drink it. Because guess what? We're giving poison toxin water, poisonous toxified water to children to drink. Small developing bodies and brains that are way, way less weight. And we're given this chemical toxin in a high part per million ratio to children. And we want to just say it's a conspiracy theory. The people doing this are fucking garbage people. Fucking garbage. They don't give a rat fuck about anybody but themselves, and they don't care about their children. You don't have a reverse osmosis system. I don't care where you get it. Go get a decent one. I'm not in bed with any of these companies. I make nothing. I'm recommending a product you need for daily life because of how fucked up shit is in our daily life. That rat poison's added to our drinking water. And people aren't filtering and they're gulping it down glasses at a time. And then they wonder why they can't think clearly and come to accurate conclusions. And why they can't wield true scientific methodologies through their brain. Because their brains are fucked up. From soft metals being fucking bombarded into them all day long. And then instead of looking at why their brains are fucked up, they want to cry conspiracy theory. When they don't know the first thing about the science. Because they're not scientifically minded people. They're believers. You know? And then people want to say, I'm trying to run a cult. I'm trying to teach people scientific methodology and destroy all religions and all cults on the face of the whole earth. But I'm a cult. I'm wielding cult methods and trying to bring people on board a cult. Yeah, that makes perfect fucking sense. Doesn't it? I'm telling people how they're indoctrinated by cults, telling them all the methodologies that cults use to bring people into their fold, telling people I want all worldwide cults destroyed and I want all the religions of the world destroyed because that's what holds back the spiritual progress and the progress in consciousness of all humanity. But I'm trying to wield cult methods and become a cult. That's the last thing I want is for anybody to believe me. There's no belief required. You need to look up the science yourself and understand it. Because your brain's too fucking burnt to understand it right now. That's the problem with people. They have completely destroyed unscientific minds that aren't even oriented toward a true level of understanding of our world. They don't have those tools in hand or in mind at all. And they want to reason from emotion and belief. And think that they could somehow magically, accurately come to an accurate conclusion. Let me tell you something, folks. Your intuition ain't that good. You know? You need to sometimes apply intuition when you're first listening to someone to say, well, what's my feeling about where this comes from? Does it come from a true heart-based perspective that you can feel that this person's really has an interest at a soul level? At a level of true care, trying to bring people the truth because it's the right thing to do, you can apply your intuition to that. But you're not going to try to apply your intuition to how high a plane is flying or what they're spraying out the back end of that plane. That you need scientific tools in hand. You don't just say, I want to feel what I think about this from this airy-fairy perspective. You know? You don't want to say, well, I trust what's in the drinking water. I just have a feel. I'm going to feel my way around that. And I'll just say a prayer over the water and it'll just be fine. No, that's called New Age bullshit. That's called airy-fairy New Age woo-woo is what that's called. All right? There's a difference between a developed intuitive aspect of the mind, which is part of the sacred feminine aspect of the mind, and then trying to feel your way around everything and rationalize through your emotions around everything. You can't come to an accurate understanding of actual truth and measurement through that. You need to wield the tools of the trivium and quadrivium accurately in order to do that, which is the true scientific methodology. So moving on, the next level down, which we can live with for a little bit longer of a period of time rather than not having air or not having water, is food. So they're putting all manner of toxins in the food, from artificial sweeteners, which are probably the most poisonous neurotoxin and acidifying thing to put into the body. Again, the soil of our food needs to be acidic. Okay? If you alkalize it, you destroy the ability to grow nutrient-dense food because nutrient-dense food can only be grown in acidic soil. You look that up, you will see that I'm giving you accurate information regarding that. When food is toxic and or not nutrient dense and doesn't have the right nutrient makeup, it will acidify internally. It will become what is known as an acid forming food. And that doesn't mean that you put a pH strip into the food and you determine whether it's at an alkaline pH or an acidic pH, whether it's a base or an acid. You don't do that. A food can be an acid and yet be alkaline forming in the body when it's processed by the body. This is what many people don't know about foods we put in. You drink pasteurized, homogenized milk, it's a high level alkaline, a high level base. It tests high on the basic scale, okay? Much higher than a neutral of where water is at around a 7, okay? All right, so you test it, it's going to be in the acidic, in the base scale, in the alkaline scale. But what happens when you put that into your body? It's acid forming. It's acid forming in the body, although it's a base outside the body. If you juice fresh orange juice with the pith, you remove the rind, just scrape the rind off lightly right below the rind, and you keep all the white pith, and you do that with like 10 oranges, and you put them through a juicer, like a centrifugal blade juicer. It will make a creamy, almost off whitish orange creamy juice that is real orange juice with the pith integrated into the juice. And you tested that with a pH strip, it's going to test highly toward the acidic level of the spectrum. But when you drink that glass of orange juice down, that is alkaline forming in the body. It's the exact opposite of a glass of homogenized, pasteurized dairy factory farm milk, okay? Which that level of, processing and high level of processed dairy content is going to acidify the body when it's put into it continuously. Whereas fresh fruit juicing with even an acidic form of a fruit like oranges, fresh oranges, organic oranges, is going to alkalize the body when you put that in there. And disease will not form in an alkaline environment. People have cured cancers just by doing continuous orange juicing or eating fresh oranges all day, especially when you eat the pith with it or integrate the pith into the juice. That being said, the death cult, the satanic death cult that are really the rulers of the world, are constantly finding new methods of injecting poison into the food. And there's you could just go on and on and on, genetically modified food, genetically modified wheat that has gliadin in it, this hybridized form of wheat. Gliadin is a perfect gut poison and immune system poison that destroys the positive gut flora in the intestinal tract. And it also attacks the immune system and the digestive system, which is one of the first parts of the immune system. This form of modified wheat is in almost everything. Modified corn, genetically modified corn, artificial sugar. This is the other thing, folks. There's a big war on all forms of sugar. Oh, you're going to juice all of that and drink it, and that's going to be, that's going to be a high level of sugar. Well, not all forms of sugar are the same. Natural, simple carbohydrates found in fruits are necessary for human health and brain operation and development. And people will insist, no, that's not the case. No, wrong. All forms of sugar are not equal, and people will go eliminate all sugar and all carbs, eating this fad low carb diet and keto diet. Highly dangerous diets. You do that for a health reason that you've worked yourself into. That's one thing, and you do it for a short amount of time until you've started recovery. You would not want to make that your main way of eating, or you're going to be in poor health long term. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. They want to praise it and say, I'm going to make this a lifestyle. It's really an ignorant way of looking at all of food in general, all of nutrition in general, which I've done whole shows on in the recent past. All forms of sugar aren't equal, folks. Natural sugars in vegetables, in fruits especially, and in vegetables, are not detrimental to human health. Refined white sugar, which is what they use in all of these products, all these baking products, all these, toxic sugary foods. You want to eliminate that from your diet. That they put in cereals and children's cereal. This is poison. That white refined sugar is a toxic poison. Look up the work of Dr. Russell Blaylock. I mean, this guy put up some of the most fantastic stuff regarding nerve toxins that are in the foods. And again, I always highly recommend the work of Kevin Trudeau, who is still rotting in a jail cell right now, unfortunately. Because regardless of what business practices he may or may not have engaged in, let me tell you something, folks. This guy did damage to the big agra and big, poison toxic food industry. He did damage to it. Because this guy put the whole overarching worldview of what's going on with food and nutrition out there in a big way. And I learned more about what's really going on with our food supply from Kevin Trudeau than anybody else. And natural cures they don't want you to know about is the Bible of that. Okay? So if you haven't read it cover to cover, don't think that you know what you're talking about when it comes to food, because you don't. I tell anybody that has not read Natural Cures from cover to cover that they are sadly and sorely deficient in their knowledge of what's taking place with our food supply, and specifically who and how they're getting the toxins at the levels they are putting them into our food supply in our food chain. You don't know. You think you do, but you don't. Unless you've read that book cover to cover, because it is the definitive source on the topic. And I'll give my heartfelt recommendation and commendation on that tome of wisdom from Trudeau. So you can like him or not like him. That doesn't matter. Just like you can like or not like me. I don't give a shit. Okay? You don't like my personality? Tough titty. I don't really care. Not my problem. That's yours. I'm doing nothing but what I'm charged to do by creation itself. And that is to speak the uncomfortable truth that most people don't want to hear about themselves and about the world they are living in. And I'll do that till the day I leave this domain. Okay? So regardless of whether my personal way of delivering it gels with you, or my personality blends nicely with how you think a personality should be, I could not care any less. That's not what the great work is about. I have my personality. I like it. I have my delivery system. I like it. I don't intend to change, and I'm not gonna. If anything, I'm gonna get harsher and harsher. Because I said, as I grow older, folks, I have way less tolerance for bullshit. My bullshit meter it pegs out very quickly with people anymore. I don't want to be around bullshitters. I don't want to be around lightweight people who have thin skin. Not interested in them. I don't want them in my circle of acquaintances. If anything, I'll say a word or two to them in public, and then I don't want to know you after that. It's your work after that. I'll hit you with the truth. You're either ready for it or not, and oh well, I've done my charge. And then it's up to you, and then it's your karma with what you do after it. You didn't receive it from me, that's not my problem, that's your fucking problem. Okay? And all the people who say, you'd have a bigger audience if you gave it to them with people, a nice little sugar coating. Fuck that. That'll never be me. Not interested. The wideness of my audience has never been my goal. Ever since day one. And if you listen to my podcast, I've never intimated that that's been my goal. Ever. I've always talked about horizontal integration versus vertical integration in the terms of knowledge and learning, which again, most people don't know what those terms even mean from a social influencing perspective. Social engineers know what those terms mean. Horizontal integration means you're one person trying to act as the central server and feeding the information to as many people as you could possibly reach. I have never been trying to do that since day one. What on earth is happening has never been attempted to be a centralized platform. Never. And if you don't understand that, go back to the podcast that I did. I think it was around 200 when I talked about how to get around censorship through different technological means in an age of censorship. So how to get hidden or occulted information in the age of censorship. And that's using distributed network models through BitTorrent, which cannot be shut down. They'd have to shut down the entire internet to shut down that protocol. Okay? Learning how to use that to do end runs around modern day technological censors to get information that you want that they don't want you to have. The two models that I explained were the centralized client-server model and the decentralized distributed network model that's used in BitTorrent. The central model means me as the server of the information is going to try to serve that truth out, serve that knowledge out to everybody as I'm the definitive central source, and then I try to get it out to everybody egalitarianly. I have never been trying to do that. I'm going to say it again. I have never been trying to do that. And let me say it a third time for the fucking hard-headed out there. I have never been trying to do that model of truth distribution. I have never been a naive fuck enough to think every person in the world can possibly receive this information from me. I am not that egotistical, and I am not that naive. Do you understand yet? Do I have to say it 1,000 more fucking times? My model for what on earth is happening, for my work, my aspect of the great work, has been, is now, and will always be reaching the people who are already prepared to go all the way to the truth because they've already done a certain level of self-work and progression in consciousness, who will then go on to become teachers who have different characteristics, personality traits, and delivery methodologies that are not like mine, that will reach more people. I am not trying to build a worldwide collection of followers. I am trying to build a hardcore, small, inner circle group of teachers with thick skin and high-level knowledge. And that is all I have ever been attempting to do. I want this said and understood for all time on this show. And the reason I get so pumped up and angry about it is because I've said it about 50 times already. And yet I still have asshole jackasses that want to insist they know what I'm doing more than what I've said I'm doing, when I've never implicated that I'm trying to do what they think I'm trying to do, ever. That's why I get enraged about it. Because you're trying to tell me what I've been trying to do here since day one, and you don't know a fucking goddamn thing about it. Not even a little tiny bit about it. Zero is what you know. You know less than zero about what I've been trying to do. Less than zero. So, let me calm myself down from that outburst and go back into my slides. And folks, let me tell you something. If you were the one receiving the nonsense, bullshit, comments and speech that I get about some of this stuff, you'd be way more angry than I am. You'd be ready to kill somebody. I hold my anger in deep check, actually, compared to what I feel inside sometimes. When you're reading people who don't know you from Adam, they don't know the first fucking thing about who I am or what I do on a daily basis, and they want to go in some public forum and say, you know me, you know what I do, you know what I'm trying to do, you don't know a fucking thing about me, boy. Not a thing. I'm sick of that shit. Okay? And this is my catharsis for it. I'm not going to spend the bulk of my time that I do research and build slides and deliver information, but I'll speak on it once and for all time and get it out, because I'm not going to keep it in and get cancer because I don't let it out. You know, I held that shit too long, folks. Let me tell you something. The early days of What on Earth is Happening are over. They're over forever. Because I tried to play Mr. Nice Guy, and it was largely a persona. And I'll just openly admit it. I tried to do that thing where I'm not going to let my full personality out because I don't want people to get scared. You know, but guess what? We ain't in the time where there's even enough time to even be at that level of politeness and niceness for people. I'm not interested. I'm not here to even talk to the people who don't know anything anymore. To get them on board. You want to get on board, you send them back to podcast 1 where I was Mr. Nice Guy. Okay? That ain't ever coming back in What on Earth is Happening. I'm done with that. I'm done with that character. I'm done with that persona or mask that I put on to just get people to listen up to a point. Well, we're at podcast 215. It's 12 years later. You know, it's at least 10 years later from the formal podcast. It's 12 years later from when I started doing this. I'm done with that guy. I'm done with that persona. That's not really who Mark Passio ever was, to be quite frank and honest with you. I've always been who I am right now, talking on the airwaves right now. I tuned that all the way back, so that I could get the message out and people would hear it and give it a chance, even though I put a little bit of that in. You know, now I'm just letting loose. You know, I'm not on any network anymore. Okay, I do this straight out of my own, means through my website and my social media on my dime. That's it. So I have no restrictions on me now. I'm going to say whatever I want, whenever I want. But that Mr. Nice Guy from What on Earth is Happening podcast number 1 is never coming back to the airwaves. That was a different time and place, boys and girls. And that's long gone. We don't have that kind of time anymore. We're at the final hour. We're at the final minutes and seconds of the final hour. So this is part of the death cult society, folks. They want to make people as sick as possible. Because sick people don't think right. Sick people can't act in the world. They don't have the will to act. Sick people are in and out of hospitals all day. They're spending their money on their drug system, their toxic drug system, their toxic so-called medical system, which is a part of the death cult. A big integral part of the death cult at that. And sick people will listen to nonsense. Sick people will listen to people who they think or have their interest in mind, are going to tell them what they need to do to be better, to get well. When in fact they're psychopaths feeding them more poison. They're part of the Satanic network. Doctors, big pharma, you know how many of these people are actual practicing Satanists? You know how many more of them are de facto mini-me Satanists who don't give a rat's ass about anybody but themselves and the profit they make on the poison they push? Well, let me tell you something, folks. There's a good percentage of doctors and people in big agra and big pharma that are heavyweight dark occultists from a perspective of being actually in the know in the cult at a much higher level than I ever was. And you don't think those psychopaths are out there pushing drugs and medicine in the healthcare system, knowing that all they're going to lead to is sicker people, dependent on them, making them richer and richer and more powerful? They know it like they know the back of their hand, like they know their own name. And you're naive enough to think they care about you and they want to help you? Only a naive child thinks this way in the modern world. Huge part of the death cult. Poisoning people through food. Now let's get into the pharmacological aspect of it. Poisoning people through so-called medicine, through so-called vaccines. You know, all of these things that we want to say are somehow diseases that have come into the human domain over the last couple hundred years. These aren't just genetic disorders. These aren't just some kind of neurological cases that just came on in human society. These are all different forms of vaccination damage. All the neurological disorders, organ disease disorders, autism is just a word for a spectrum of vaccine damage. That's all it is. It's an invented word. It's not a disease. You look up autism, it is a spectrum of illnesses brought on by vaccination damage. They just use the term autism to euphemize it and not say this is what somebody came down with once they got hit with the vaccines, that the medical industry is the death cult of the medical industry is poisoning people with. Asthma, leukemia, seizures, epilepsy. Oh, that's a big one. But people don't understand how many seizure conditions come on from vaccine damage. I believe personally I have I have 3 forms of vaccine damage. Straight up being honest with you about health issues that affect me still, that I don't really know whether there's a reversing it because it has altered one at a deep genetic level and turned on codes that perhaps with enough work and healing, you might be able to reverse and turn back off. But it would be very, very, very difficult. And I don't know if it can be done with just nutritional techniques alone. And that is allergies, and that's probably the least damaging of the ones that I feel I have been affected by. And that's on this chart. But also migraine headaches. And I don't suffer with painful migraine headaches. I mean, knock wood, folks. I mean, thank God. Because I'd be in a debilitated condition. I see family members who suffer with the painful ones, and they are often incapacitated for days at a time. Migraines are another form of vaccine damage. I suffer from painless migraines, and most people don't even know that there is such a thing. But if you look up painless migraines with aura, A-U-R-A, like an aura field around the body, it's the same, it's spelled the same. It's a aura that actually is generated by the brain, which happens often before a migraine hits. There's actually 3 kinds of migraines. People don't know this. I know I didn't when I started getting the aura migraines. I thought I was having a stroke or something or starting to go blind. I panicked. You know, I kept my wits about me long enough when it first happened to me because I didn't know about what an aura migraine was. I looked it up and, finally calmed down. I'm like, okay, that's what's going on here. I'm having an aura migraine. I just have to sit tight for like 20 minutes to a half an hour. It'll be gone. And that's what I did. And, often it's this scintillating vision that you see and you can't shake it. You can't get it out of your field of view. And it will often cover a part of your field of view and expand out, sometimes all the way out to the peripheral aspect of your field of view. It will be a scintillating, almost computer-like pattern in your field of view. It's very disturbing, actually. When I first had it for the very first time years ago, I went into practical panic mode. I'm like, what the hell is happening? What is this? But I, learned about it, and it's a painless migraine. And what happens is sometimes these precipitate the painful migraines. So there's really 3 kinds of migraine. There's an aura migraine with no pain at all. So it's aura and no pain. Then there's one with no aura and just pain. Those are like the worst because you don't know when they're coming, right? You don't get an aura to warn you because the aura always comes first. Then the pain will hit 15 minutes later. So people can take some type of Tylenol or Advil or something like that might help with the pain response of the headache. And then it doesn't hit them the pain doesn't hit them as hard. Okay. Or you could do other natural methods where it'll mitigate the pain of the painful part of the migraine. That's the second kind. That's the worst kind to have. Then there's one where you have both. You have the aura, and then the pain hits 15 minutes or so later, 20 minutes later. And at least that gives you a warning. Most of my family members who suffer from migraines get the worst kind, which is pain without an aura warning. I have the opposite, where I have an aura, but then no pain strikes later, which is the most fortunate one to have, because it doesn't involve the pain in either ones that involve it. So, when I get them, and I get them like maybe once or twice a year, thankfully, they're not often, I just have to kind of stop what I'm doing, sit back, let the aura pass, because especially if you're doing anything that involves having to have accurate visual eyesight or acuity, like driving or working at a computer, you just can't do it. And that's basically, what I do on a daily basis. I'm either, working, sitting at the computer, and going and driving, getting supplies, or, driving down to the gym. If it hits when I'm doing one of those things, I just have to either pull the car over, wait it out, or just, come off the computer, stop what I'm doing, and just wait it out until the aura is gone. The last one I had, I was actually sitting having lunch with my producer one day, on a day when we weren't doing the show, and it struck, and I had to just sit there and just wait while luckily I wasn't doing anything else that was, demanding of, very close attention, and I was just, eating a lunch. But, through most of the lunch, I'm seeing this scintillating aura spread out through my visual field. So I think that's brought on by vaccination damage, the types of migraines that people get. I think that's something that has affected the vaccine has affected the brain physiology. And I think that the one that's also on here is diabetes. And diabetes is, something that is brought on. That would be under autoimmune diseases. Okay. Diabetes is an autoimmune disease that affects the immune system of the body, and particularly the pancreas. And this autoimmune disease, I feel, is brought on by vaccine damage. I think that's why a lot of diabetes strikes people later in life, because these are often time-activated genetic codes. That's why they want people with all of these vaccines stuck in them at an early age. They realize they don't get these in at an early age, people are going to be living longer, be healthier, not have all of these different immune system destroying, diseases through these vaccines. All of these things are brought on by vaccine damage. I mean, learning disability is a big one. ADHD, all of that, attention deficit disorder. This isn't something that has just always been like this. These are a spectrum of disorders that have happened over the last 100 years in our society, and continue to grow at an alarming, outrageous, accelerated pace. And then people want to say, no, they're perfectly safe, non-toxic, and effective. When you look at any one of the ingredients, you would not pour a glass of it, or even take a teaspoon of the ingredients and drop it into some water and, slam it down. You wouldn't do it. But then you want to say what? Being injected subcutaneously is somehow healthy or good for you? I mean, this is what I don't get. It's like saying, no, hold on a second. Let me get this industrial grinder, grind up some glass down into a fine powder, pour it into some water so it looks like a suspension or a solution, and just gulp it down. Wow, great. Why not? Why not have some microscopic shards of glass in your intestinal tract, right? You wouldn't do any amount of that. You wouldn't take any amount of a ground up powdered glass and put it in a glass of water any more than you'd take a fine aluminum powder, melt it down, put it into solution, and then drink it down in water. You wouldn't do it, any amount of it. But you'll inject it into a baby. You wouldn't break open a thermometer, okay? Draw up some mercury into a syringe, okay? Have the needle syringe right there and go, let me hit your distilled water with a little bit of this mercury, and then I want you to drink it down. I'm only going to put a little in there. It's only going to be, a couple of 10,000 or so parts per million. Somebody would look at you like you were an outrageous lunatic out of your goddamn mind, out of your rabbit ass mind. Okay? That's what they would look at you like. Yet, let me stick this baby with 10 needles that has this stuff in it at these concentrations. I mean, people don't think at all. Because guess what? The priest in the white lab coat costume told you it's fine to do. And he's the priest. He's in the priest class. The priest class wouldn't lie to us. They want us well. They want us healthy. Yeah. They don't care that health would mean that they'd lose their McMansion out in Bumblefuckville. They would lose their 3 Lexuses in their 4-car family garage. My God, they'd only have 1 Lexus in the garage. How would they live? How in God's name would they live? I just don't know. They wouldn't be able to take the Bentley out for a Sunday spin, When they're not at the hospital, they're just on call. And we don't think that these are psychopathic lunatics. That if it meant them losing their profits and people becoming well and just not needing their services as much, they'd go, poison those motherfuckers. We need them in and out of our hospitals like a revolving door. That's how they think in their mind. That's how they talk in their own circles. You don't think they do? You're out of yours. You're out of your goddamn mind. You're a naive child if that's how you think about what's going on in the world. And let me tell you something, folks. People who just brainlessly, mindlessly believe that vaccines are somehow safe and effective. You have so much learning and so much picking apart of real science to do when it comes to this. You have to look at the ingredients of modern vaccines and the types of adjuvants that they add to these things and soft metals that are put into these admixtures, these chemical cocktails of poison. And you think that that's vaccination science. I'm telling you, man, people they're so ignorant, it's painful. And then they'll say the people who are really concerned about this and have seen the pattern repeatedly that when a round of vaccination is given to their children, that somehow all these disorders and diseases came on like a freight train, that they don't know what they're talking about and they've gone through the direct experience of it. I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'm going to be harsher and harsher about it. You know what should happen to the people who don't understand that this is what's happening? Your fucking child should get these diseases. I'll say it right to your face. Your fucking child should be diseased like this in this form from hitting them with these toxins. Then you'll see, and then you'll care. Then all of a sudden you'll care about it. And you know what? Some people won't even fucking care then. Because they'll just say, no, it wasn't that. It was some other random thing. Then they believe in randomness. Everything's just random. It's a crapshoot. Just because I hit my kid with 16, vaccines with all kinds of soft metals in them and other toxins and adjuvants. It just around the same time they came down with these horrific afflictions, but it's just coincidence. It's just randomness. Could have happened when I didn't give them one thing. There was this kind of a neurotoxin or brain toxin that passed the blood-brain barrier. Man, I mean, you want to listen to somebody who really knows their stuff about it more so than I do. Look, I'm not a neurosurgeon or a neuroscientist, but let me tell you something, folks. Neuroscience has been one of the underpinnings and the foundational research areas of my work that I do, because you have to understand that. You have to understand all those aspects of the brain at least a sophisticated enough level to know what these social engineers are doing to the brain, which then affects the psychology, the mind, and of course affects the body and the rest of the central nervous system. So I know quite a bit about it, but I'm not pretending to know something like the level of knowledge that a neurosurgeon like Dr. Russell Blaylock understands about all of this. And let me tell you something, he's not the only one. Look, do research into Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, whose work is outstanding, who I got a chance to meet personally at Anarchapulco 2019, and she was just great to talk with. She actually sat next to me at the Ron Paul dinner at my table, and it was just a pleasure getting a chance to speak with her personally. And you want to talk about a woman who knows her stuff, you know, you just look into her material, and that's another fountain of information. Okay? Russell Blaylock, I cannot recommend highly enough. And these people know. They go into it at a very deep level, medically and scientifically, and they know their shit. You know, I'll personally look at their research because they're looking at it from an objective point of view. You know, they were doctors. They could easily be making money from all this stuff, but they want to do what's right and tell the truth above that. Nothing wrong with making money at what you're doing if you're trying to put it out there and do, you know, really do right by people and really truly help them. You know, once it starts getting into this thing to toe the line and to toe the narrative, these people are speaking out, and that takes balls to do that. You know, so I celebrate their courage and all those who are like them in the industry who are speaking out. One of the biggest aspects of the death cult is war, militarism, you know, imperialism. This is human sacrifice. That's what it is. It's modern human sacrifice rituals. That's what modern warfare is. And then you put it into video games. You not only have it happening in the real, very real world, people killing, sacrificing each other on the altar of sacrifice called a theater of war, but then you put it into the video games for the young children who are addicted to these 3D video games, you know, and you have them glorifying the whole war, combat, death cult ritual scenario, because that's all it is. Instead of marching young men up to, you know, the top of a, you know, great pyramid built to their satanic gods like Huitzilopochtli in ancient Mexico, the sun god who demanded the hearts of, you know, tens of thousands of sacrificial victims on his altar. Instead of having hearts cut out with obsidian blades by the priest class in front of everybody, you know, so they can actually see, whoa, these are our masters. We're their sacrificial victims. They're just directly sacrificing us to their gods. Well, now they don't do it, and they don't do it on big pyramids, you know, with a big altar at the top for everybody to see. That's not how it's done anymore, folks. That's ancient satanic ritual bloodletting sacrifice. Modern satanic ritual bloodletting sacrifice is warfare. Hidden theaters of war out in the middle of nowhere in the developing countries, out in the third world countries where, you know, there's a sparse population and there's not a big infrastructure, at least not as big as the first world nations. There are, you know, some first world infrastructure there, but not at the level of other nations, you know. And you send off the young, totally brainwashed, total know-nothing fucks that these little boys are, because that's what you all are. You're little know-nothing punk bitches. Not a one of you is a real man. Not a one of you has any real courage. You want to know why? Because for real courage, you need real knowledge and real care. And you haven't developed those things. You've said, put a gun in my hand, tell me who to go shoot. As long as I don't have to think, I'll take the order from my master. And that ain't a man. That's a sick little fucking boy. Is what that is, boy. That's exactly what that is. And people want to glorify these fucking punks and say, we thank you for your service. Fuck you. You don't protect me. You don't create my freedom. The God of all creation gave me my freedom, boy. I've been endowed with my freedom by creation itself, and that ain't you, punk. My freedom is inherent to my consciousness. And the only thing that protects it is my adherence to and loyalty to natural law. It has zero to do with you and your brainwashed behavior. Order follower of your Satanist master. Trying to tell me you know where my freedom comes from and you're actively working to protect it. Fuck you. How about that? How about we just say it out in the open just like that to the people who think that's what they're doing to the military? You don't like it? Turn it off. Don't listen. Dig your own grave. Keep sacrificing yourself on the satanic altar. I'm beyond the point trying to convince you that you're wrong. Go think you're right, asshole. You don't know what you're talking about, and you're a dumb little fucking boy. You know, I want to blow smoke up somebody's ass. I'm going to come on the air and say this shit to them. Let me tell you something, folks. I could totally water everything down, talking sweet nothings in people's ears, tell them all the nonsense fucking spirituality that the new age bullshitters want to tell them, and I can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Instead of a few hundred, if that. Okay? But I wouldn't be doing my job telling people the truth. You know, because that's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear what I just said about the military is the exact truth. No. They want me to blow spiritual smoke up their ass. Like the new age bullshitters do. You know? But they'll have 10 million followers, you know, making hundreds of thousands a month. Because people want to support what they want to hear, not the hardcore truth that's uncomfortable to listen to and to hear. But you know what? As long as people want to pay attention to little sweet nothing bullshit whispered in their ear, the world is not going to change for the better, folks. Until people start listening to the hardcore, unadulterated, painful truth about the way that the world really is and the way the human mind really is, as fucked as it is. Nothing will change for the better. Nothing at all. You want to believe that that's how it works? You go right ahead believing your nonsense spirituality. I'll be here telling you the real deal. I'll take a hit on all my followers. I don't need followers. I don't want followers. I want people who understand what is true and real, and that which exists in the realm of nature instead of the sick, twisted constructs of the human mind that knows nothing about reality. And I'll keep telling people those truths, even if it dwindles down to no one listening. I'll be in a minority of one who knows what's really taking place, and that's just fine. That's just fine. Because that's what I'm here to do. I don't serve human beings. I never have served human beings. I serve creation itself by explaining the real dynamics that are taking place here on earth. And that is what the great work is all about. So, these people right here in this image, members of the death cult, at a totally low level of being their slaves, of being their house slaves. The police are right in there with them, being militarized, brainwashed, turned against the people, following whatever immoral orders they're given on a daily basis. They are members of this religiously diseased cult called statism, which is ultimately two Hegelian dialectical sects of the real one world cult of the ancient religion of Satanism, the old religion. And these people want to say they serve the force of freedom. You couldn't fucking spell it, boy. You couldn't spell the word freedom, let alone know what it means, let alone truly serve it. Don't try to tell me about what real freedom is. You don't know the first fucking thing about it, punk. Part of the death cult. One of the biggest parts of the death cult that keeps their masters in place. Because what these people do is they go from country to country. Anybody that doesn't want to play ball with the globalist agenda, they invade, take over all their resources, kill as many people as possible to get their people to comply with the big overarching death cult that runs the world. And that's all they ever have been. That's all they're doing now. That's all they ever have done. You are the servants of your satanic masters. You are house slaves. Whether you understand it or not, whether you agree or not, that's what you are. And no amount of disagreeing with it will ever make it untrue. That's the eternal truth. The actual objective way that it is in nature and reality. And no getting offended or crying about it is ever going to make it not the way that it really is. That's the way it really is objectively. I'm not going to sugarcoat and say, well, you can have your opinion and I'll have mine. You have a dumb fuck, brainwashed, socially engineered, satanic worldview opinion about what you are and what you're doing. And I have the truth about it. And I'm speaking the truth about it because I have the balls to speak the truth about it without sugarcoating it for jerk-offs. And that's how this show's going to go. Because we're out of time, folks. Out of time. Then you have people in the black ops, in the intelligence societies, in the military, in the police forces, in the political, arena, who orchestrate and conduct and then cover up what is known as false flag operations. I was in probably what is the most definitive documentary on what false flags are and how they have been used historically to precipitate political agendas that the population would not ordinarily go along with if not given a traumatic set of circumstances that they feel necessitates that political agenda, which is the Hegelian dialectic in action. Problem, reaction, solution, as David Icke refers to it. Creating a very traumatic problem so that you get an outcry from the public, do something about this, and then you come forward with your predetermined and pre-planned solution and try to implement it, which the public wouldn't have gone with unless they were severely traumatized in a mass ritual event, a mass death ritual event, which is the false flag event. Again, false flag doesn't mean it was a hoax or no one died. You could call that a hoax flag, okay? Which is called no problem reaction solution. It means the thing you said happened didn't actually happen. That's how I like to delineate. Other researchers have their stance and they like to delineate in a different way. I like to distinguish by calling a false flag an event that actually happened, okay? And people died, okay? And then they use that for their political agenda. And I call it a no problem reaction solution event. I call a hoax flag, which means the whole thing was a hoax. It didn't really happen. Or they portrayed it as it happened, but no people really died. And they used crisis actors. And then they try to push forward their political agenda. So that's the second form of the overarching thing called a false flag ritual event. A mass killing ritual, and you could put killing in quotes because sometimes it's a real killing, sometimes it's not. It's a staged killing. And the documentary that I was in is called Shadow Ring. It was made by the people at Free Mind Films. I believe Chris Emery was the executive producer, and they did a fantastic job on it. I just found out this week that I actually am in I'm in the IMDb database. I didn't even know this. I looked up my name on DuckDuckGo, and one of the links that came back was an IMDb listing for Mark Passio. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? So I looked at it, and it was for Shadow Ring. So I thought that was pretty interesting that I made IMDb for the documentary Shadow Ring, in which I appeared. So people should check that out because there's a lot of great researchers in it that you could go into research in their work. And in doing so, it will open up an entire other deep rabbit hole of research that you can go down regarding historically conducted false flag operations. So this meme says there is only one reason to believe the government's official 9/11 story. Because you blindly trust our government and you have done absolutely no research for yourself. And that's the only reason. negative knowledge, accepting that which isn't true, that was just told to you because that's easier. It's an intellectually lazy path to go down. I just believe it because the government told me so, and they wouldn't lie because they have my interest at heart, and they wouldn't want to tell me an untruth about what happened, or they're not covering anything up. Total naive child believes that point of view. And that puts you into negative knowledge. Not only don't you know, I'm not claiming to know everything about it, folks. There's lots of things we don't know about what took place that day. But I'll tell you what, there's things that we know that didn't happen. And those are the things that the government is saying of how it happened. That I can definitively prove physically, with physical laws, the physical laws of nature, that are just borne out by scientific methodology, through the scientific method, that I can prove, according to scientific methodology, could not have happened according to the explanation of the official 9/11 narrative given to us by Big Daddy government. I can prove it definitively, and have, right here on past episodes of this show. You know, so that's why I praise some of the physicists and engineers who have come forward, that have the balls to come forward and say, no, it couldn't have happened like this. You know, and then a lot of the other people, they know that it couldn't have happened the way, look, I pulled out to prove it to myself, like the year after it happened, like not even a year, like 6 months after it happened. I went into my old high school level. I went into my high school level physics textbooks. Junior level physics 101 textbook. I pulled out the physics textbook with the initial Newtonian equations that they give high school level students to learn the equations of basic Newtonian mechanics. Okay? The formula to solve a simple quadratic equation, like a first level quadratic equation. Okay? Plugged in the numbers of the official weights and measures of the buildings of 9/11, erred on the side of the official story in every capacity. You know, I didn't take into account all these things that a real engineer would take into account. I did it in a very sloppily done way, but all in the favor of the official story, never taking into account the sophistication and the particulars of how a real engineer would work these equations and put all the secondary aspects and figures into the equation to try to do it from a real world mechanical perspective instead of a modeling perspective. I use just a simple modeling perspective with the physics equations and the simple weights and measures publicly available of the World Trade Center towers, and did not account for all the other factors and variables that a real engineer, a professional engineer, would account for. Giving every one of those factors to the official story, it was still a total scientific impossibility for the building to come down in the way that it came down and happen at the speed at which it did. All three buildings, Tower 1, Tower 2, and Tower 7. Which still to this day, most people don't know that a third building allegedly collapsed on 9/11. It came down, but it wasn't a collapse. Building 7, World Trade Center, Tower 7. Most people still have not looked at that video where it collapses directly into its own footprint and had not been allegedly struck by an airplane. You know, you have people still to this day, they're shown that footage and their jaw is on the ground because they are like, why didn't the media ever tell us that 3 buildings came down instead of 2? Some of my listeners still don't know about Building 7. It's crazy. You know, I saw it on the first day where they put it on the first initial reports. And then never again after the very first day, because a mandate came down to every news network and said, don't ever show that footage ever again. And if you do, your family's going to end up dead under suspicious circumstances. And you want to see it happen? Air that footage ever again. That's how it was. That's how it came down inside the news networks, folks, to the highest level officials in all the major news networks. Intelligence operatives visited them, said, you ever show the collapse of Building 7 ever again on your network, we're coming for your family. And that was it. That's the end. That was the end of it forever. But you bet your ass that is exactly what happened behind closed doors. Highest level intel operatives came in, paid them a visit at the networks, and said, try showing it one more time, ever. And see what happens. Watch what happens. You don't think that goes down just like that? It goes down just like that. That's how it works. Because this death cult is in charge. Because we've let them take that power through our ignorance. And they'll keep pulling these false flags and hoax flags. They'll keep pulling them over and over. People will still keep buying them. And the same method will continue to be effective over and over and over again. Because the public just doesn't learn. The public doesn't learn. You know, last week was the anniversary of 7/7. And I'm sorry I didn't get to this slide on 7/7. You know, it took until the next week. But, you know, this was another false flag event orchestrated by social engineers and intelligence operatives that are all part of the big cult that you are not in. The one world satanic network of mind controllers and social engineers. And this is a big part of their bloodletting rituals. The bombs that went off in the transportation systems in London, England on 7/7, when drills had been all conducted to postulate the exact same environment. You know, they always do that. They always run drills that simulate the same thing so that when it goes live, people don't know the difference between the drill and the live op. That's what they did on 7/7. That's what they did on 9/11. The occult gematria involved, 92 being the failure of will in the occult, the failure in consciousness, the failure of care. Let me tell you something. And then, you know, you see the gematria of 7/7, which is the sorcerer's number in the dark occult. That's why it reduces to 14, you know, which is the 14th level of the pyramid, which is being God on earth. The 14th level of the all-seeing eye and pyramid. They want to usurp the place of God. The occult sorcerers are 77. They want to take the place of that 14th level of that all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid, above the pyramid, which is level 14. 13 courses of the pyramid, and then the 14th level is the eye of God, the eye of creation, the eye of truth. They want to be that. They want to become that, which is what we talked about. That's what all of Satanism is, wanting to become God. So you look at that gematria. 92, destruction of will, destruction of consciousness, destruction of true care. That's their agenda. That's what puts people into slavery. And 77, 77, the number of the sorcerer himself. Okay? So, a thing I want to tell people about, you know, I didn't know if I was going to have time to get into it, and I know we're running late again, but, you know, it'll take as long as it takes because this is important. I want to recommend the television series Strange Angel to people. It's a very well done period piece on the life of Jack Parsons and how he got involved in the occult philosophy known as Thelema, which they unfortunately incorrectly pronounce often on the show. They say it as Thelema, and it's Thelema if you're pronouncing it correctly from the original Greek. And how he headed a Thelemic lodge called the Agape Lodge in Pasadena, California, where he began JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory, had the acronym of Jack Parsons Laboratory, became deeply involved in this form of occultism, met Aleister Crowley, was assigned to head the Agape Lodge in California, and this show tells the story of it. But what I find very well done about it is they are really injecting the Thelemic philosophy deeply into the show from a level of understanding that it truly is. They're not portraying it simply as dark occultism, or although they hint that it has elements of that, which it very well could, depending on what lodge people have gotten involved with. So, you know, it has all of those elements within it. and people should be discerning and, look at the actual philosophy from a deep level and make a delineation or a distinguishment between the real underlying philosophy and the human level of how people have turned and twisted it, because they're not the same thing, as I've always emphasized. But I would highly recommend this show because it really interjects the real philosophy of Thelema. To my knowledge, it's the only show that has ever, on television, that has ever put Aleister Crowley into a character on the show. Whether you want to agree that it's accurate or not is a different story, historically. And talks about his intelligence ties to the British intelligence during his foray into the United States during World War II. But it's so well done as a period piece, how it is portrays the 1940s. I think, how it portrays the way society was back then, from a social point of view, from the point of view of the buildings and the streets and, the objects. It's quite well done from that perspective, from my point of view. And on this last week's episode, they actually brought the philosophy, the occult philosophy of the book known as Liber Az, which is a small document, into the storyline, which I thought was really great. As I've talked about it on an interview that I did with Bob from Cincinnati on his podcast called Occult Empire, where we did a show on Thelema and Crowley's life. And I talked about Liber Az in that show. And it's highly powerful, and it shows you how much people are not ready for the truth of that, type of occult information. And that's all I'll say about it for now. But I think that if it's separated from specific human practices that have unfortunately become associated with it, the philosophy itself can align with natural law at a deep level, if it is properly understood from that occult esoteric level. And that's the only level I ever encourage people to look at Thelema from. And it's the only level I ever have encouraged people to look at Thelema from. So that being said, I think people should check out Strange Angel. Not that many people even know about the show. Very well done television series. They're in the second season now. Let's move on. So you step out of, the regular human domain, and you see that our whole society is also a death cult when it comes to animals. And in many ways, this is the biggest way that we are a death cult society. We kill more consciousnesses. We exterminate more consciousnesses than we do in any other aspect of life by the slaughter, the endless, perpetual, daily slaughter of animals, taking the amount of lives that we do, so-called for our sustenance, for our food, that is not required and necessary in any way. So I see a million times over and over, there's going to be people who will vehemently disagree that we somehow need animal flesh in our diet. It never has been the case. It isn't the case now. It never will be the case for anyone. Once again, a normal, healthy, functioning human being physiologically does not need any animal products in their diet. When you have developed an addiction to eating a certain way, two things happen. The sicknesses that will get brought on might require you to stay with a certain form of a diet, because changing it will change the physiological aspects too abruptly. You would have to transition off slowly. And two, if you have eaten that way your entire life, regardless of whether you have health problems, you can actually precipitate them by radically and suddenly changing your diet too quickly. But that does not mean that you need animal products. It means that because of the level of brainwashing in our society regarding this, and the level of habit forming behavior that people have engaged in regarding the eating of animals and animal products, that people cannot just go and transition to veganism quickly. Again, I look at my transition to veganism. It took 12 years. 12 years I transitioned slowly to a vegan diet. And that's why I did it correctly and healthfully. Folks, do I look weak to you? Because let me tell you something, folks. I have so much energy, I don't know what to do with it most days. I need things that take the edge down on a daily basis, not ramp it up. Okay? I'm the most ideal weight that I've ever been. I'm the most energetic that I've ever been. I could kick my 20-year-old self ass down the block, up and down the block, if I wanted to. Okay? I weighed myself yesterday. I weighed 190.0 pounds, my ideal weight for my height and body type. I am at the weight that I weighed when I was a sophomore in high school. How many people could say the same thing when they start getting a little bit older, okay, and say that they're that healthy, eating that right, feeling that level of energy all the time? You know, hey, don't get me wrong. I get depressed and down and don't want to do things and like want to just, sulk for a while because of how bad things are in the world. That's not what I mean when I'm talking about. I'm talking about physical energy to do things. Okay? I get on that stair climber for a half an hour solid before I start my workout every time. How many people my age are doing that? Or doing martial arts. Most people will say, I don't have the energy I had when I was young. I'm way heavier than when I was young. I don't feel the same way. I feel way worse. Well, guess what? That's because you're doing the wrong things with your diet. And that's part of the death cult. They want people moving toward more unhealthy ways of being as they get older, so that they're in and out of hospitals. That's the effect it has on human beings, let alone what it's doing to the animal kingdom. We're eating all that energy. That's etheric energy. Everything here is energy, folks. At a basic fundamental level, everything that we see, experience, take into ourselves, put out into the world is a form of energy. And they want it poisoned and black-hearted and death. These are the Death Eaters of the Harry Potter wizarding world. That's the dark occult. That's all this is a big, that's all that whole, those allegorical movies were. That's the death cult. Serving the satanic overlord master, Voldemort, who wants more and more death and more slavery. That's the government. The dictator, the totalitarian, who wants everybody else serving him as God on earth. And that's what they're doing through this animal slaughter endlessly. Again, this is what inspired the show. This is what inspired, not the whole What on Earth is Happening series, but the last two shows. Podcast 214 and 215 were inspired by me just making the mental recognition, walking down the street on a daily basis, how many animals are just endlessly slaughtered by the human society on a daily basis. It's one never-ending death ritual, an eating of death ritual. We're not eating life. We're not taking in life into our energy. We're taking in death into our energetic system, our etheric energy. And this is the problem, folks. Most people aren't spiritually advanced enough to understand this level of consciousness and morality. I don't want to beat up on them. I want to take them into the fold of knowledge. Many are too much in ego, and their ego would have to be broken down more by internal work that they do upon themselves. But many are also misguided by inaccurate information when it comes to health and nutrition, which is why I revisited this topic a few podcasts ago. They don't have a balanced perspective or an accurate perspective about what truly nourishes the human body, mind, and soul. And those are positive, life-affirming forms of energy, not energy that is dictated and given to us by the death cult, whether it be mental food or physical food. The way that we got to this level of eating animals was because of the death cult, causing the cataclysm that it caused. I feel through all of my research, folks, can you say I can 100% prove it from a total, scientific methodology? No. But we have fragmentary pieces of the puzzle that we can put together in a logically organized way. The earth was not always the way it is now, folks. We were in a practical Garden of Eden when the earth was at a 0-degree rotational axis with respect to our plane of orbit around the sun in the distant ancient past. That means it would have been eternal spring and food could have been grown everywhere all around the earth at any time in any season. There were no seasons to speak of. It was perpetual spring / perpetual fall, with perpetual perfect amount of rainfall where things weren't too cold to grow or too hot to grow. And that's how planets that sustain our form of life are intended to be by nature itself. But that doesn't mean through acts of free will that we can't offset that balance in nature and create a different situation that nature did not intend for. The 23.5 axial tilt at which our planet rotates with respect to our plane of orbit around our star, which creates the precession of the equinoxes, is not something that is natural. In my understanding and worldview, through the taking in of the amount of data I have taken in regarding what has happened here in our ancient past. People are free to believe that, not believe it, accept it, not believe it, not accept it, entertain it, don't entertain it. Again, that's your work to do. I'm going to tell you what I've discovered through my endless amounts of research and work that is obsessive. You know, one day I'm going to walk in the other room, I'm going to go pull all the bags of data that I've ever hoarded from my years of research that makes me almost pass out when I look at it, realizing I've gone through almost every bit of it. It's obsessive. I'm almost like a robot in some respect. It's crazy. It almost frightens me how much data I've downloaded and gone through, because I became obsessed about it because of who I was involved with in this cult, in this worldwide hierarchical satanic cult. Because I became personally involved, I became an obsessive researcher regarding it. Let me tell you something, folks. Their interference with our species, this other species, that I feel is a type 2, I'll say a 1.5 on the Kardashev scale, minimum. A level 2 civilization on the Kardashev scale of civilizations, maximum. Somewhere between that 1.5 to 2 level, transitioning to the 2 level. But I'm telling you, once you get to that, the feats that can be performed technologically by an entire civilization like that are beyond magic to our level of understanding when it comes to physics and science. Beyond magic, beyond almost godly, which is why they often referred to them as gods. And again, to clarify a little further, when I say I believe in the interference theory of human origins, that means I don't accept the Darwinian notion of macrobiological evolutionary theory, nor do I accept creationism from a religious perspective. So people should realize I see both of those as Hegelian dialectics to try to push people off the path of truth, which lies somewhere completely different than just the pure scientific notion or the pure religious notion. I don't consider it either one of those as being true. And I've gone through many podcasts on this topic, which is why I say again, you have to go back and you have to listen to the podcasts in order, in their entirety, without skipping any information, without skipping around, and while looking at all the ancillary data that I give you with each podcast. If you're going to develop an accurate worldview and an accurate understanding. If you yourself have not done that, do not claim that you know my work, because you absolutely fucking do not know it. You don't know what I'm saying, you think you know, but you have not taken in the totality of the data that I've output or the research material that I've encouraged people to look into to understand my work. Don't claim that you understand it if you have not done that work yourself in your own time. Certainly don't claim it to me that you understand that all what I'm saying, which is why I'm telling you, if you haven't done that, this is not the podcast to start listening to. 001 is the podcast to start listening to. And when you're done that one and all the material that goes along with it, progress to podcast 002. Don't skip around. Exhaust the material in the podcast, then progress to the next one when you are ready. That is how to maximize the learning for what on earth is happening. If you are not doing that, you are not only not maximizing the learning process, you are believing things that you know nothing about regarding what I'm actually saying. So unless you've actually done that, you don't know my work. Don't claim to know it to other people, and certainly don't claim to know it to me. All right? So that being said, I think from the myriad of data that I have taken in regarding the events of the ancient past on our world, that this type 2 civilization created the cataclysm that set the planet at a different axial tilt and put us into a period into a situation where there are now seasons of life and death on the earth. In the northern hemisphere, which is where the bulk of the population migrated because that's where the bulk of the landmass is. We can no longer grow food year round, and at any place on the earth, we now have to grow it in temperate zones in the northern hemisphere, which is where the bulk of food production must be centralized. In addition to that, we can't live anywhere on the planet. People try to live in extreme zones, but really they migrate to temperate zones. And because they can't grow food everywhere, they began killing animals to supplement the diet during the season of death, which is the time when the sun is below the equator in the southern hemisphere, half of the year. But that was given to us. This way of being in the world, this way of life was given to us, just like they gave us our government structures, just like they gave us our religious structures and institutions, just like they gave us the monetary structures and institutions. And folks, when I talked about the origins of these institutions and structures, it was the only time that I was ever censored in the entire time I've ever been doing the work that I've been doing here at What on Earth is Happening. It was the only time that I was ever hit with a personal computer distributed denial of service attack from other compromised computer systems directed against my own IP address as I'm trying to broadcast my voice for my show on the past podcast when I talked about the origins of money, religion, and government. That's it. That's the only time What on Earth is Happening was ever attempted to be censored or slowed down. Because they care about people knowing where those real origins were and how our society got to where it is today by taking these institutional bodies from the beings that really created humanity. But people don't want to talk about that. No, Sitchin didn't know what he was talking about. Von Daniken didn't know what he was talking about. They were agents. All the voluminous research they put together, in addition, tons and tons of other researchers, they're just the tip of the iceberg. Now, when you start looking at other people's work like L.A. Marzulli or Brian Forrester, or any other myriad of people that I put forth in Cosmic Abandonment, that you can go on for endless lifetimes researching just their work alone. Lloyd Pye. But no, people won't look into that. They just form an opinion. What have you looked into regarding that? I ask people that always say, no, that couldn't be that way. They've looked into balls squat. Exactly calculated. That's the exact amount they've looked into. I calculated that with a slide rule and an abacus. That's how much they've looked into. That exact amount. Okay? Then they want to say their opinion is as good as endless, countless hours of research, meticulously won research. They gave us our way of performing endless sacrifice rituals with animals. Folks, all you got to do, All you got to do is open up the Bible and look about the rituals performed with the sacrifice of animals that were given to us, not by the God of creation, but by the gods of the ancient world. They put into effect, after the cataclysm, the death cult society regarding animals. And people, you don't want entertainment, you don't want to entertain that notion, don't look into it, remain ignorant. Shut the show off. Say I'm a shill. I don't know what I'm talking about. Although I've researched 100,000 more amount regarding that material than you'll ever in multiple lifetimes. Fuck this notion of saying I know how little I know. I know how much I know. I could still be honest and say I don't know it all, but guess what, folks? I know the bulk of what is important to know about what's going on this planet that's keeping humanity in slavery. And I'm not going to be humble and so soft-spoken about knowing it, because that knowledge was hard won by sacrificing endless amounts of my personal time, of my life, to accrue. And then I see other people that don't lift a finger and not spent 1 second of time on it, who want to then proliferate their ill-informed opinion, your ill-informed and unread opinion. And then you're going to tell me you know as much as me and I should be humble and say how little I know? Fuck you. No. And that's not ego talking, folks. I'm speaking truth about what is. It has nothing to do with me putting ego out as an individual. What takes balls and endless amounts of ego to do, what takes hubris. It's not balls in the sense of courage. It's gigantic levels of hubris, of unwarranted pride, and complete disrespect and ignorance to come forward and say that in your ill-read and ill-informed state that you know as much as researchers who have done so much that it's more than you've ever looked into all the dynamics of what's going on put together, and more than you would in multiple lifetimes. In this one lifetime, that's how much I've studied this one aspect when it comes to the interference theory of human origins. It has become almost an obsession. And let me tell you something, folks. They gave us our animal slaughtering practices. Whether you want to accept it or not, that's what happened. And just like, other stories where people go, oh, I just do this because this is how people did it before in the past. David Icke talking about the old story, his old anecdote where his sister cuts the corners off of the roast before putting them in the oven when she has a very large baking pan. What do you cut the corners off for? You're wasting, so-called food. Okay, we're talking about a meat roast, but it's the principle we're talking about. Okay, it could be a tofurkey roast, whatever. Okay, cutting the corners off and throwing them in the garbage can. Why'd you do that? I don't know. That's how my mother did it. They go to her mother, their mom. Why'd you cut the corners off the roast? I have no idea. That's how my mother showed me to do it. I never wanted to do it that way. I just thought she knew better, and that's how she told me to do it, and I just kept following that way to do it. Then they go to the grandmother. Why'd you cut the corners off the roast every time you made a pot roast? Well, I had a very, very small pan and it never fit. I would roll out the roast, set it up, put it in the pan. It was too big for the pan. I had to cut the corners off. So for doing it for a real world practical reason, didn't communicate that down to the next generation, just said we lop these off. Doesn't matter how big the baking pan is. It could fit 2 roasts in it and you're going to cut the corners off. They were going to cut the corners off. See, that's how most people do things. They don't look at, is this necessary? It's how most meat eaters look at it. They're not going to look at it, is it necessary? All they're looking at it as, is this the way we've always done it? Just like I said in a venue to someone, we're in a state of slavery. And they retort with, yes, but it always has been that way. How does that constitute an argument? How does that constitute even a retort to the statement, slavery is the human condition? And then you go, but it's always been the human condition. Well, what the fuck is anybody supposed to do with that statement? What does that even mean? Because what it means to me is you're okay with slavery. That's all it means. It means you're so immoral that you find nothing wrong with the continuance of slavery if it's just always been like that. So therefore, who gives a shit if it continues and it's always like that? You know? That just makes it fine because it's always been like that. That doesn't make it fine. Just because it's always been like that for you, and just because it's always been like that for the culture that you live in, still means that you're taking something that doesn't belong to you to take. Which is what all forms of transgression against natural law are foundationally built upon. Is this your rightful property? So if you want to make the claim, is another being's life your rightful property, you can believe it is all you want, but it'll never make it true. That's not your property to take or to participate in taking. So there's no, I can only go so far in repetition with that. But most people are going to roll with what they know, with what they've been taught. I told you who gave the practice to humanity. That is not something that just, organically appeared in our society over long, long periods of time. It is not. Okay? That is something that was given to us as a practice and an institution as part of the whole death cult satanic society that we now have in the ancient past by the beings that built this satanic death cult society. And that we as human beings perpetuate in the modern world, which I call Satanism. Folks, this is a very disturbing image. I usually don't put things that are too disturbing. And folks, this is one of the least disturbing images I could find regarding abortion. But you want to talk about one of the sickest, twisted, most vile death cult aspects of our society, it is the issue of abortion. Highly polarizing because government is brought into it. I think government should be annihilated, but I also think the practice of abortion is immoral. So, I don't want government involved in it because I want government destroyed. The issue of government and the issue of abortion are two different things. There are two forms of immorality that I want wiped off the face of the earth from a place of consciousness, not from a place of having to control it or even do it physically, because the best place to do it from, where it won't come back as the disease that it is doing it in consciousness. This is why, while I recognize physical revolutions may have to occur to give people an extended chance at getting it right, and has been done a la the American Revolution, the best way of doing it is through understanding the truth and putting that into practice in our lives. That's why I like the movie, the modern film Mary Magdalene. The message of the allegorical figure of Jesus is put forward as, we have to do this in consciousness. Doing it just through war ain't going to get it done. I'll take the notion that if it has to be done through that, any means necessary. If we have to go through the revolution to give people one more turn at the big wheel of karma, revolution is a valid option. Physical rebellion, righteous physical rebellion is a valid option and can never be taken off the table with this psychopath satanic society. I don't prefer it be done that way. I prefer it be done through higher levels of awareness and consciousness and accurate spiritual understanding. And that would involve the understanding that we shouldn't be engaging in the practice of cutting formed babies out of mothers' wombs. Folks, you want to get sick to your stomach and go into a murderous rage, type in the term abortion in Google Images and go through them. I sat there I'm telling you, it was very, very hard. It was very, very, very hard to do. To even find this image as something that I will put in my presentation that isn't too gory. Because you want to see what they do to these unborn infants. It will make you sick to your stomach. And this is what people are embracing in our society and celebrating. This is how far into the death cult, satanic aspect of our society we have come. Look, I was going to show the video. I can't even watch it. Video just surfaced from, I can't remember what group exposed it, but they showed abortion doctors making aborted fetuses dance on the fucking pan table that they throw them in after they're taken out of the mother's womb. Like, somebody should postpartum abort them if you take my meeting and make their carcasses dance. That's what should be done to those so-called fucking doctors. I don't even want to start it. I don't even want to start talking about what I would do to people like that. Let me tell you something. You better pray this slavery society never collapses. That's all I'm saying. This is a death ritual. This is the rituals given to us that we keep running with from a total death cult and a death worshiping and a death eating society. They devour this energy at an etheric level. And let me tell you something, folks. This altar of sacrifice is never ending. Just like war, just like the altar of sacrifice of animals, the altar of sacrifice of babies is endless every single day. Every single day. Hundreds of thousands worldwide. And that's what it looks like. And guess what, folks? I'm telling you, folks, it looks much worse. That's a tame picture, but it's of a late stage one. And you're going to tell me that's not a life? You know, I don't really care what women get offended by that and don't want to listen to me. I just told you I don't want government involved in any aspect of any of our lives. But you think that that's moral and okay? There's something really fucking wrong with you. And they don't want to show you what it really looks like. Go on Google Images, go on DuckDuckGo Images, you type in the word abortion, and you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. And it gets worse and worse as you scroll. You can't really fathom and really deeply feel what you're looking at when you go through images like that, folks. I'll put a link. I'm going to put a link in the podcast to the word abortion searched on the images page of Google Images and on DuckDuckGo. Both. I challenge people to scroll through them and not feel sick, not feel emotionally undone. Because if you can, you're a fucking psychopath. I'm sitting there, the thoughts I'm thinking, you don't even want to be thinking. Realizing how far we are in this death cult. And the people celebrate and embrace this. It's sickness. It's spiritual sickness. And then if the murder of the unborn and that being celebrated isn't enough, we have rampant pedophilia everywhere. You know, then we traumatize and torture and initiate into the death cult society our actual born young. From the time that they're babies all the way up through early adulthood and beyond. And this is the unspoken elephant in the room in our society. It's another reason I have to do a presentation on Pizzagate and call it that. That's the name it was given through social networks, through, social media networks that popularized it. And then they sent a mind-controlled ass to go and shoot up a pizza restaurant to try to make it look like, extremist lunatics were only the ones looking into it. The whole fake news narrative came out of Pizzagate. The whole Russian collusion narrative came out of Pizzagate. People don't know this. They don't understand what came out of the Podesta email scandal and the Pizzagate scandal. They don't understand the timeline. They don't understand why the media seized upon it as quote-unquote fake news because it blew up during the Trump presidential campaign. They don't understand the level of involvement of both the Democratic and Republican parties regarding this. They don't know what was in the contents of the emails that came forth. And they believe the bullshit real fake news narrative that comes out of the mainstream media about it being fake news and a conspiracy theory, instead of actual email communication that was hacked and taken from government's own email servers in our government. You know, and came forward through WikiLeaks, which has never put out false information regarding their hacks and leaks. And have borne out every time to be accurate. The amount of data is going to take years, the data dump from WikiLeaks, to even process, to even understand what we're seeing coming out of that. And let me tell you something, the Podesta emails are one of the biggest things in that, which are all downloadable. They're all out there. You don't need to take anybody's word for it. You need to go research it for yourself. I've been talking about this for over 10 years. Read the Franklin cover-up by John DeCamp to understand this aspect of the death cult society, the trafficking of children, how it's done through drug cartels, monetary cartels, even religion does it. Organized religion, organized crime, mafia syndicates, Middle Eastern Islamic syndicates trafficking like this. It goes through religion, it goes through organized crime, it goes through intelligence agencies, hugely. It goes through boys and girls boarding schools that are involved to supply pedophilia. It goes through or businesses that have chains set up near trucking stations and truck stops throughout the whole country, and train stations, because they're easy to traffic through. It goes through, it connects deep in with airlines and airline agencies to traffic these children and get them below radar of people who are looking for trafficked people. And this is what people don't even want to talk about. And actual leftist brainwashed, cult members on the left want to say the whole thing in pedophilia is not a problem. It's a conspiracy theory, and we should even accept it as a sexual orientation instead of a crime. It's not only a crime, it's beyond a crime. It's a cult religious practice of the cult that is ruling the world. So that's what I wanted to talk about regarding the death cult aspects. Then our society is structured satanically like a prison. First of all, in the United States, we have the highest ratio of people in prison in our society per capita than any other nation in the world. We now have incarcerated in our prison system 2.3 million people in the United States alone. 2,300,000 individuals out of about 325 million. And guess what? Out of those 2.3 million people currently in prisons all across the United States, which is part of this satanic society, is to keep people traumatized and caged and threaten them with that if they do anything outside the purview of the masters and their morally relativistic so-called laws. Out of the 2.3 million, guess how many people are non-violent so-called offenders, meaning they have not actually violated the rights of any other individual. They have only done things that contradict the moral relativism in the laws of the ruling class who make those laws, and the satanic network who ultimately rules that ruling class. 90% out of the 2.3 million incarcerated in the United States alone are incarcerated largely on illegal drug offenses, so-called illegal drugs, over the selling and or manufacture and or taking of what other people deem are substances that should not be inserted into the human body, should not be consumed by human beings. Which, first of all, is slavery in and of itself. Saying what someone can and cannot put into their body is a claim of ownership on the body itself, and therefore a claim of ownership of the body, and therefore slavery. All prohibition is slavery. Stop talking about it as just something the government does that you think they don't have a right to do. The rhetoric is not strong enough. Prohibition is slavery. Taxation is not just theft. It's a euphemism. Saying that it's theft is a euphemism. Claiming that you own any percentage of the labor of another is a claim upon the body and mind of another, which is what they perform that labor with. Therefore, you are saying that you own another, in whole or in part, which is called slavery. Stop euphemizing. Taxation is slavery. Government is slavery. We have to stop using euphemistic language. It's slavery. It's not just taxation. It's not just theft. It's not just prohibition. It's slavery. All of it. No matter what government institutes it, where or when. It's slavery. And let me tell you something, folks. This is totally reflected in the numbers of people that are caged for putting a substance into their own body or voluntarily transacting with something who's putting a substance voluntarily into their own body. These people aren't the drug pushers, the 90% of the 2.3 million people incarcerated over so-called illegal drug offenses. The drug pushers are the pharmaceutical industries that say, come to our pharmacy and get free flu shots and vaccines. They're pushing their drugs with all the commercials. Ask your doctor about this. And it just has these side effects, including death, turning blue, whatever the fuck all the side effects are. Endless list of side effects that they read at 6 million miles an hour. But then go ask your doctor about it. They're the ones pushing it. Nobody's saying go ask your doctor about the health benefits of cannabis on just about every disease, autoimmune disease, cancer on the face of the earth. No. But that's pushing. That's drug pushing. You know? Nobody comes up to me and goes, here, just have all this cannabis. I want to push it at you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We've all been there, right? We all see how that works. Yeah. It's like the highest prices that it's ever been. Especially for anything that's potent. That you could actually do an extraction upon and get, powerful medicine from. And then they want to say that's outlawed, and they'll throw you in a cage, for their morally relativistic bullshit so-called laws, saying that they're God and they'll determine what's in your body. They're your master. They own your body. They own your consciousness. We'll tell you what you can and can't put into it. And you still have house slaves saying that's perfectly fine. We should outlaw drugs and keep them outlawed. Can't see how it's slavery. You are making the claim. You are God. You are the master of others. And putting something in your body, I'll claim that I can regulate what can be put in your body. And therefore I own your body. And want to throw people in a cage for it. And we have the highest level of a prison society out of any other country on earth. Because this satanic society has infiltrated mentally, perhaps more deeply than any other country on the earth. Simultaneously, I've said it and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it because it's still true. The American society still has the highest consciousness out of any society on the earth. Simultaneously, in this country. We are still the best and only hope for the world. And guess what? Our European brothers and sisters, listen, get as offended as you like by that statement, boys and girls. Because let me tell you something. You're dropping the ball way worse than us with the bullshit censorship you're letting go in your country. Look at what just happened to Tommy Robinson. I don't need to be a fan to say he has the right to speak and to expose what is going on. You can say you're on his political side, but guess what? The right to speak and conduct journalism is universal and it is absolute. He's not threatening anybody. He's not using fighting words. He's reporting on something that the establishment is uncomfortable in him reporting on, and they're putting him in jail because of it. And not only is it a disgrace, it's something you guys should be in open fucking rebellion about. You should be in open rebellion about it. And people are sitting on their ass watching the BBC. See, all the bullshit that comes to your countries out there come here like 5 to 10 years later. Because you don't get, what you don't get, little boys and girls, is that you're the testing grounds for the Satanic society. You're where they throw the shit at the wall to see what sticks. And unfortunately, you guys let it stick because you're disarmed. They got a lot harder of a time making the shit stick here. They still do a pretty good job of it. But guess what? They got a lot harder of a time getting it to stick here because they know this population's heavily fucking armed, boys and girls. And you better believe that. And when the time comes, those fangs are coming out. And all the military and police, you think you're going to win that battle? You're the dumbest bags of shit walking the earth. You don't know what's here. You don't know what's here. You have no idea what's here. So you're just banking on you can get the dumb fucking public to agree with your stance and somehow take your side. You, in any way, lose that at any kind of a large level. You have no idea what's here firepower-wise. I told you before, you'd have to saturation hydrogen bomb America. That's the only way you're taking the whole planet. Because you'll never disarm this place. Ever, ever, ever. All you people out in Europe, listen, you better know that like you know your own fucking name. Your agenda, your bullshit agenda out of Brussels, it ain't ever coming here and taking our weapons. We'll coat this planet in bloodshed before we let it happen here. You better fucking know it, boys and girls. Fucking know it. Trust. Okay? The second part of our prison society is how much we treat our school children in a classroom environment like they're in a prison. Move at the sound of the bell. Be quiet. Don't talk to each other. Eat when you're told to eat. Sit when you're told to eat. Stand when you're told to stand. It's a big ritual. This is a satanically structured mind control, brainwashing ritual. Part of the Gramsci plan out of the totalitarian Frankfurt School of Bavaria, Germany, to usher in total communism and total totalitarianism to all the countries on the earth, to make it a one world communist dictatorship. As is outlined by, none dare call it, Conspiracy by Gary Allen, which you have to read. This is a long-term plan called the Long March Through the Cultural Institutions. Look up the Long March Through the Institutions. Understand the Gramscian plan, Antonio Gramsci. Social engineer, member of the think tank out of the Frankfurt School. Very deeply connected in with the Fabian Socialist Society and the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs at Chatham House and Wellington House in England. You think this whole cultural mind control, this whole social engineering program hasn't been here for not only decades, but hundreds of years with this slow paradigm march, slow societal cultural march. Hundreds of years it's been going on for. But people are like the frog boiling in the pot of water, slowly. They can't see the long-term change in pattern. Look, I briefly spoke about it. I'm not going to make this an issue because I don't really think there's a lot to it. There is something to it as far as certain intellectual acumen aspects. But I told people what I was tested at as far as what they call an intelligence quotient, an IQ, in an IQ test, what I call an intellect quotient. And my IQ was tested at 147, which is way beyond the average bell curve IQ and considered in the genius category of what they consider the IQ quotient, the intelligence quotient. And that was largely because of the pattern recognition that I displayed in the test. It wasn't so much the verbal and mathematical skills, although those were high. It was what put it off the scale was my ability to extrapolate patterns based on how past patterns, show a progression, and then extrapolate the pattern. That I knocked out of the water on the test. Most people can't see that. That's what they scored the lowest on in these types of tests. I pride myself on being able to see interconnections and patterns in what's taking place in our society. This is one of them. The long march through the cultural institution, through the education system. And they have patterned the entire school society very, very wisely and smartly from their point of view and how they're trying to conduct, their slow game over long periods of time to bring us into totalitarian slavery. From their perspective, it's genius. David Icke calls it the totalitarian tiptoe. It makes it very difficult when you go from point A to point B to do it through a slow stepwise progression, a little at a time. So people can't see the larger plan of where you're headed, where you're taking them. We also have a money-worshipping society. And this is part of their God. This is part of the worship of their God. They know everything is energy and flow. That's why they call it currency. That's why they name it after their God, after the satanic one world cult, which the God was always the phonetic variation in any ancient culture that you study it or look at it, was the consonants B and L. B and L. So you can put any phonetic variant of vowel sounds in between the B and the L, and you will have one of the names of the gods that they worshipped in the ancient world. Baal was one of them, worshipped in the Akkadian society, Carthaginian society, etc. Bil in the older Sumerian, society, and Ur. You had Bel, which was another ancient, older name that goes into the Levant area, the Carthaginians, etc. But one of the basic agreed upon terms was B and L. And this is why it's found all over the language. That's why they call the center of focus that they want you to worship their false god that is not the God of creation, but is the God of the perpetuation of the slavery system. They call your focus of worship the bill, the $1 bill, the dollar bill of whatever denomination it happens to be. They put the symbol of the God of creation, the all-seeing eye, symbolically representing the truth, representing knowledge, representing goodness, representing the pouring of the conveyance of the knowledge of natural law into our physical domain on the back of the $1 bill as an energy talisman. You pay bills, which is the center of focus on our emotions and all of our worry, with these bills. See, it's all a little ritual. It's all a little word gag and game that they love to play to just get you focused on what they want you focused on, but never seeing the big pattern of slavery. And they have their sycophants and their, acolytes worshipping at their altars. This is the altar of the satanic elite right here. This is one of their altar. This is one of their ritual chambers, the New York Stock Exchange. One of the places they get everybody focused on their god, the bill, and into a frenzy about it. It's a huge satanic ritual chamber to focus energy and then send that focus of care into their proxy god out into everybody else in society through their whole centers of money worship in banking institutions, in stock markets, in just focusing on all of that to pay bills, to get the money in whatever immoral form of work and wrong livelihood people do it, to get their bills, their energy, their form of sick satanic energy flow. And if they're not doing it covertly like this, folks, they're all too happy to be very overt about it and just show you who the God is that you're worshiping. Because there it is. They'll put it right out in front of you on Wall Street. There's the golden bull. The golden bull. There's that BL again. Their god, Baal, Bill, Bel. The bull. How is Satan depicted? Satan is always depicted as a cloven, hoofed god with bull horns and hooves in the traditional classical Christian representation of the Christian devil called Satan. So it's a symbolic gag, overlap, pun. They love putting it out there to you. Here's what it is, but you can't see it. It's a ritualistic mocking. They love to perform occult mockery. So, folks, we have 10 minutes left in the show. Well, I'm not going to take calls this week. I'm going to forego it. Finish the slides. Next week, we're going to do a whole call-in show on this topic because that's how important it's been. It took 2 weeks to go through the slides and for me to say exactly what I wanted to say regarding all of this. That's how I'm going to progress with the podcasts from this point forward with these shows. I want to say all the elements that I want to talk about with these topics and expand on them and make them like full-length presentations in and of themselves. So if we have to do full call-in shows on the topic, I will not necessarily truncate a show as far as actual slide material. And next week, I'm going to put off what I wanted to talk about next week, which was the tarot. That's going to be the next topic. The tarot as an understanding of the progression of consciousness, not only in our own selves and our own lives, the microcosm, but a progression of consciousness worldwide on a societal scale throughout our whole culture here on Earth. Okay, and I'm going to do that through a breakdown of the major arcana tarot cards, combined with the Kabbalistic world tree, the tree of life, which I'll get into at the last slides here. But, you know, I really want to take my time with this stuff and really hammer it into people. And then I think having a whole call-in show clarifies the topic as well. We're going to do a call-in show next week just dedicated to the topic of our entire society is structured after one big satanic ritual. That's what the call-in show will be for next week. Okay? Because I want to hear your take on what I've talked about over the last 2 weeks. And I want questions to this dynamic. That's what I really want in the call-ins. What I want are questions that force me to clarify what I've talked about on the past 2 weeks that you may not fully grasp, or you want a further clarification or expounding upon. Ideally, that's what I want on the call-in show for next week. Okay? So they're using their little occult mockery and symbolic mockery. Okay? Our God is Bill. We're going to put our God, the bull, right in front of the place where all of the money worship goes on at the New York Stock Exchange, which is a big ritual chamber where we focus all that energy on our God. See, they believe, whether you believe it or not, your belief is not required. They believe that that's what focuses energy and entrains people into a way of thought by doing it with this symbolic and pun aspect. It's a huge part of their ritual. It's a huge part of their belief system. And guess what? You don't need to believe in it. That's how energy focus works. That's how the mastermind works. A bunch of people come together who believe the same thing and then act the same way, and they get results. It works like that, whether we accept it or not. And our belief is not required for that. They're willing to act upon it through their free will, and they do. And that's why they're kicking our ass, because we're not engaged collectively and on the same page and acting upon the opposite dynamic with our free will to make the world the way we want. They have that knowledge, they have that care, and they have that will, and we don't. Oh, I'm sorry. I went 2 slides instead of 1. The perpetual me, me, me society. This is where I'm going to basically wrap up, and I'll just hint at next week's show. Okay? This is what it really is all about, folks. They give us a lower level version of their occult beliefs and ideologies. Okay? That's what this all comes down to, ladies and gentlemen. They want us in a mini-me Satanism mindset. I've explained this over and over. The more they can get society to believe in a me worldview, where I'm the only one who matters, I'm the king of creation, everything I do every day is just to serve me and get more, be more comfortable, have more money, be up a higher level of the totem pole in society. And guess what? Other people's suffering, none of my business. I don't care. They don't understand what's going on. Who cares? They're constantly, their rights are violated. Who cares? As long as I'm okay, that's all I care about. That's Satanism. That's the definition of Satanism. That's what I call mini-me Satanism. The big cult leaders are giving you a watered down scale of their ideology. You're latching onto it, agreeing with it, putting it into practice in life, and you're a de facto Satanist as a result. You don't even need to know the word Satanism. You don't need to know the first thing about what the ideology of Satanism that I spent the whole first half of last week's show explaining what the ideology is. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go back and watch that, because it's a prerequisite for understanding the society of me, and mini-me Satanism. When you look at those satanic tenets, you'll understand, yes, our society is totally satanically structured at an ideological level. And until we turn that dynamic around and we get out of that case of the ego, that entrenched, calcified case of egotism and ego worship, nothing is capable of ever changing in society. And the cult that runs the world knows that. They know that that's how that natural law dynamic works. So I think that's where I'm going to end this week's general slide discussion, but I want to keep that up there, please, because what I want to do is just hint at next week's show and let you know 2 weeks from now, I should say, not next week's. Next week's going to be the call-in show on the topic of our entire society is one big satanic ritual. In 2 weeks, I'm going to cover aspects of the tarot that I really wanted to talk about last week, but didn't have time and didn't embed in the slideshow. Okay, so I'm going to reiterate the topic that I've covered in past shows, podcasts, and actual workshops on the microcosmic tree of life, which is the progression in our world of the incarnation of the soul. Okay, so this is the soul's journey, and oftentimes in tarot they call it the fool's journey. Then we're going to cover some aspects of the macrocosmic tree of life, or the universe. These are the universal forces which are at work in our society. Particularly, I want to cover the macrocosmic tree of life because I want people to understand the left and the right-hand path at a deeper level from these traditions of tarot and Kabbalah. So we're going to get into occult philosophy. Okay? We're going to get into occult symbolism. We're going to break down symbolic elements of the tarot and Kabbalah, and I'm going to help you to understand what these traditions are really teaching us from a fundamental level, particularly the outcomes that are possible in human society. That's going to be the key part. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening. You've been watching podcast number 215. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to just say, if you have found value in what we do here on What on Earth is Happening, go to gifts on my website, whatonearthishappening.com. Go to the gift section. You can find hard copies of all my presentations there. T-shirts. We're going to have new T-shirts up real soon. Okay? Get the ARC drive. The ARC drive is critical knowledge, critical information that everybody needs to get. Hit the ARC tab on What on Earth is Happening, or donate at the donate tab. You can make a donation in 11 different ways now on whatonearthishappening.com/donate. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And remember, government is slavery. We'll see you right here on What on Earth is Happening next week.